sunshine out on the Mending Gallery this afternoon, despite a little bit of drizzle. It wasn't too bad, and it started to clear up right before 2 o'clock. So anyhow, thank you for coming out. We're delighted to have a full house here for Heather. Every time Heather has been very meaningful. I'm Jordan, by the way, if anybody doesn't know me. I've worked with Heather for the better part of 25 years. We've been working together since she was making work like this, which is very different than what you see in the room today. This is a show that Heather has up right now in Hancock, Michigan. It's at the Finlandia Foundation National Gallery. It's of her textile work, which is what she was doing 25 years ago, with a lot of color. She was, if you guys, many of you probably know this, she did a lot of surface design on the textiles. All of these works, these kind of art quilts, started off with white fabric. And so she did all the coloration, all the dyes, all the resist markings. There was writing in them, as you see in the work in this room. So there are things that have been, there's real continuity, even though the work looks quite different. Another thing I thought was really interesting is in these textile works, there was recurring iconography. You can definitely tell that she's got that going on with the collection you see here, with the boat forms, vessel forms. These are the icons she's using in her work, obviously most commonly now. But at the time, back here, 20 some odd years ago, staircases were big, doorways, and they sort of, again, referenced, they were metaphors in the same way that the boats are metaphors in these works. So maybe you'll talk a little bit about where you've been, where you are, where you're going. But Heather is an amazing artist, and I'm super proud to be working with her, to continue to be working with her, and this beautiful show that we've been working together planning towards for a couple of years now. It's wonderful to see it realized. Thanks. Thanks, that's the collaboration, I suppose. But I definitely give all the credit to Heather. But as I started to say, every time I've heard her speak, I'm reminded how thoughtful she is and how she approaches her work. And you can see it in all the details and nuance in her work. It really is a reflection of her as a person and as an artist. So, well, without further ado, Heather Hietala is here with us, and she's definitely the star of the meeting.
And thank you for this wonderful installation. Jordan has created an amazing gallery here. I was with him at Blue Spiral for many, many years, and he's created an amazing space here. And this, whenever you have a solo show, there's often some time leading up to it. I wanted this space specifically because it's sort of the end, and it creates a quiet. This is one of the quietest places in the gallery, I find. So I wanted a space where when you entered the work, could say you could not say. So when you came in, you could hear the work. That's what I wanted. I wanted you to be able to hear the work. The work is much more quiet than it was when I moved here. We'll backtrack a little bit. I moved here as Heather Jean Allen. Then I became Heather Lindsay Allen. Then I became Heather Lindsay Allen Swartow. And now I'm Heather Lindsay Allen Hietala. So all those people have lived in Asheville. And I think the voting registration has finally gotten it straight. It's been very complicated for many years when I try and vote. What you see here, first I'm going to just take an opportunity as a soundbite. A lot of you will know somebody, possibly even somebody in your family that has alopecia of some form. If you know a kid that has alopecia, which I have, and so was a condition, now it's a disease. So now we can get funding, so maybe they can figure out what causes it. But when I first gave a talk a number of years ago, there was a little 12-year-old up in Indiana, forget her name now, who was Rainbow. She had just committed suicide because she was so bullied at school. If you know of any young people, the National Alopecia Foundation has a wonderful, sometimes hard to find on the website, they have a wonderful program for schools, for them to run an assembly and to really deal with it in the school. So if you know anyone, any young person that has was one of my transformations about 8 years ago. So appreciate your eyelashes, your body hair, because you are in a bodysuit here, and the hair on the back of your neck. So this, I realized when I came in and I had to write a statement for this, my work I always thought was about a journey. You know, it was up and down staircases, in and out of doorways, windows. You had landings to pause for reflection. But I realized this body work is slightly different in one, that there are a lot of these little boats that have a story. And the little boats have made me realize that a lot of my work actually is about a journey, but a journey is all about possibility. That actually my work has always been about possibility. You take a step up, you take a step down, you go this way, that way, it's all about possibility. It's about a journey, but a journey is about possibility. Even when you go backwards, sometimes you have to go backwards, but that's about possibility to maybe let you go somewhere else. So now I think that my work is about a journey, but it's more fundamentally about possibility. This morning, I was canoeing with a dear friend that I have a couple friends that have a canoe that on Sunday mornings we canoe on Beaver Lake. And so he asked me, what was your question, Bill?
Oh, come on. Oh, no.
Well, he asked me, what was the significance of a paddle? And so, because I asked him if there was a question that could stump me. And, you know, and some of you may have questions later on. So a paddle, there are paddle forms in a lot of these pieces. And paddles to me, I grew up in a 3-canoe family. So I'll just do a sidetrack before I answer that question. So much of who I am and who all of us are is where we came from. So this is, my mom passed away last year. This is her shirt. Now it's a part of my life. We were about the same size. I got my body built from her. But we had 3 canoes. We lived in rural New Hampshire. We had 3 canoes. We had wooden sailboats up and down the coast of Maine, sailing dinghies. I got in a sea kayak. I was in the British Columbia, Tofino, and in Port Townsend. And so boats are part of who I am growing up fundamentally from when I was a child. Also, I wove for many years. During that textile period, I wove with boat shells, which are very reminiscent of they're called boat shells, but they're boat shaped. And I have all kinds of those that I've used over the years and found, have a collection of them too. I'm also an active gardener, so I collect seed pods. And seed pods, a lot of these can be seed pods. And seed pods are all about possibility. Boats are all about possibility. So that idea of possibility and a shape that is integral to who I am as a person and where I come from is a big part. The architecture that I worked with for many years was the architecture I lived in. I lived in some really funky houses in New England. And that's what prompted me to really look at the architecture. These things nowadays you couldn't build. Because they were too quirky. There were no regulations. And so you had all these funky spaces that caught my eye or I responded to. And then there was a time when I went on a trip. And in those, I'm an avid journaler, and it was, I'm a senior moment. Whatever, it was, when did I go to? Well, it was 2 trips. One was in Paris. I took my surrogate father to Paris. And we went down all these steps. We got on these boats on the Seine. And then in a lot of the canals in Japan, you go down these wonderful stone steps and you get on these riverboats. In Thailand, there were lots of boats that I got on before and then Winslow passed. And when significant people in your life start to pass, somehow your foundation, your sense of so much shifts. And so all of a sudden, the gravity that I felt before there was a different sense. And so the sense when you're on a boat, not looking at the water, but in a boat, that's when you lose the sense of gravity. You enter another space that is somehow that was more appropriate for where I felt I was in my journey. The gravitational and all that solidity of all those years was there, and it led to the continuation of this journey of possibilities by vessel. It also coincided with, right when I moved here in '96, we had a devastating house fire in my family, and I lost my life pretty much up to, well, I don't know, I can't remember places, we didn't have rungs, we had lift latches. It was a work of art in some ways. It was a wonderful place to grow up in Dirt Road. So, over time, I searched for something. We went through the ashes. We're trying to find this steel nutcracker that was solid. It was the solidest steel thing we found. So my sister and I hunted for days, and on the third or fourth day, we found it. So searching through the ashes, you're aware of what happens and what is left. Sort of like, when someone passes, there's not much left. There's stuff, but what really is left was the metal, and really the metal. Other ceramics have been hot. So, needless to say, that was many years ago. Got me working in wire, steel, wire. That led to a lot of things. And it got me wanting, words have always been a part of my life. I love words. I used to write in the snow in my ski pole when I constantly skied. I write in the sand at the beach. I wrote all over my cars, my skates, walls of my house, on my clothes. I like to write. I like the act of writing. And so a lot of the work here has writing that is often specifically to that time and place, and it's advice for who's ever taking that journey. Whether it's meant to be read or readable is not the important thing, because my intention of advice for that journey is imbued in the piece. So the readability isn't important. But the readability of, or the words, so there's a couple pivotal moments in my life, and one of them that led to pretty much so much of this work here. We found the steel recipe card file for my family. It was an old, really heavy-duty steel. So I happened to find it, and I was the one that lifted it. And for one moment, I saw all those recipe cards until they dissolved into ashes. And that is what started so much of this work. I wanted to write words that could survive a fire. I didn't get into clay because of the wood fire, or that because of the clay or that or whatever. I got into it so that I could write, I could write words and they could survive a fire. That's when first I went into salt firing, because I had a friend, Leah Leeson, in town, so I salt fired with her. Again, that's grieving, that's salt and tears. And that was an opportunity. It was porcelain, it was about purity, it was about letting go, it was about ashes. And so then I moved on to wood firing, which is much more of the earth, grounded, gravitational but different. And again, it's those words that this time survive a real fire. Every word I write goes through exactly the cleansing, the solidification, vitrification, but also the sort of phoenix rising from the ashes. So that is pretty much how I ended up working with wood fire, was that searching for something that could survive a fire with words, writing in particular. In this body of work, there are a number of new ideas. There was some work I had at Loose File a while ago. I had anchors. So there's anchors in terms of anchors and sea anchors and all those things that balance and stabilize us. So anchors are ongoing, but sort of the sea anchor is an anchor that is actually sort of like sometimes it's just like a big bag in the tail behind a boat. It's just to sort of slow you down and stabilize you. So you sort of just stay where you are without pinning you to the ground. So it's not the same sort of anchor as pin you to the ground and stabilize or stationalizing anchor, that kind of thing. So anchors are a symbol. Paddles, back to your question, Bill, you might get back to it. So paddles, what do paddles have to do? So I grew up in a 3-canoe family, and my dad made everybody a paddle, specific to your height, for canoe, go on these canoe trips. So I lent it to someone, so half of it is in the French bra somewhere. I lent it to a friend, and I got just the top. But my relationship to a paddle that is yours, that is not just a generic, my dad made us, and I have all these uncut, or they're cut, but unshaped paddle forms that are shaped, wood blanks, I guess, but they're cut in the paddle form that I inherited from my dad. So paddles have a specific significance because I had a paddle that was just mine. My paddle in the family was, you could tell it, because at that time I had all kinds of braids probably if I had that paddle today, I would have written on it somehow. But I lost it many years ago. Paddles are sort of like a vessel takes you where you want to go. Paddles are just the most amazing thing, sort of like a sail. A paddle with, by your own volition, allows you to go somewhere. It opens up possibilities. It can stabilize, direct you, but it is what a paddle allows is amazing. And it all comes from within your volition, and a paddle can do something. So the paddles here often are, I was married for a while, and my ex was all into Tesla and all kinds of all this alternative new age funky stuff. So he got me thinking about paddles, but maybe if you were paddles, I did a whole other series of porcelain. You know, I've lost that over time, but they were, the outside of the boats were all shaped and carved as though you were going through all these currents and all these eddies and all this stuff. And so that was a different way of thinking of the vessel. And so these are a way of, in my mind, alluding to the light of motion. People generally think of them as paddles, but they're alluding to the lightness that you want to go to counterbalance the heaviness of the wood fire. I mean, a wooden boat is a wooden boat, but a wood-fired ceramic boat is pretty heavy. And so the visual lightness of the paddles, in my mind, to allude to a lightness that the boats can allude to, but they do not have physically. Textiles, thread, like I have a wonderful technique in my arsenal that my good friend Linda's great-grandmother, Katerina, taught her, and so it's my anchor cord. It allows me to make a cord that looks wonderful no matter what, and I have it in the balancing piece too. I can make a cord no matter what, at any scale I want, because I make the cord just by this two-finger weaving thing out of any material. I've done it out of a fish line, I've done it out of all kinds of things, but it allows me to keep those sort of textile things I like. You know, my fingers like to work with thread, but now it's a part of this work too. And my job, because as you can tell from this work, I'm pretty ridiculous. I was the one that had to coil the anchor line because I could do it right as a kid. That was my job growing up, was coiling the anchor line on the bow of the yacht. So anchor lines are part of my work now, but also part of it was my job growing up. Another thing is sewing. I love sewing, stitching. All this thing together. I did this replication project for the Billboard estate a number of years ago where I was making the helmets in their second floor living hall. I embroidered for 16 months, 8 hours a day. My stitching got pretty good. But the biggest thing about that experience was that I realized I never got faster. You know, I was listening to books on CD, but my needles haven't changed very much. The thread hasn't changed. I was using the DMC embroidery floss. That's been going since the 1756, I think, when they started. And so I was working, even though I lived in the modern, you know, the US of A, with CDs, with all kinds of modern conveniences, but my needle would work at the same pace as all needles all over the world. So for all those months, it was so interesting that I was connected to this piece of the needle in a way that I've sewn my whole life, but I've never felt so connected on a global scale as I did for those months. But, so you mend, so I grew up mending. So clay can crack. That's just the nature of it. You can tear cloth, clay can crack. So when I was at Odyssey, I can't remember her name, but she knew I was searching for something that would allow me to sew my cracks in clay. So I can't remember if it was her husband, whatever. So I now work with welding rods that can go, they burn out sometimes when we hit from 11 or 12, depending on where they are in the film. But it allows me to sew. It allows me to reinforce and allows me to keep that idea of mending. Because often textiles, if anyone knows the Ashley Book of Knots, anyone? Yep. Let's just show of hands, the Ashley Book of Knots. Okay, the Ashley Book of Knots is an amazing book. It's like a Sears catalog. And it is all the knots, the nautical knots. I should have read the preface, but anyway, I have it. Because when I was dating this Dutchman, Cornelis Swarthout, we went to the Batavia. When his brother-in-law found out I was in boats, he said, we have to go to the Batavia. So we went to the Batavia, which was, I can't remember where it was, it was in Holland. but it was a replication of the Dutch, still made by the last people that knew how to make the Dutch East India ships. There was so much it was like the Ashley Book of Knots come to life. It was so phenomenal. I knew that book, and you knew it was the sailors and all that they did, and they recorded all the knots they used in sailing, but I had never seen it, like they took the Ashley Book of Knots and they made a display of it on the boat. All the bumpers were covered in macrame. It was absolutely stunning. And so the relationship between anchor lines, rigging, knots, sewing is all interconnected. And so the sewing is now in my arsenal in the play. One other thing, so my mom passed away, so this show definitely has these little vessels. You know, when you lose your mom, your last parent, whatever, you think about things a lot differently. And so, but the origins of these little vessels began with this, the larger vessels. When I lived in North Asheville, one night we had, how many here know chimney swifts? Okay, they come through here on their way migration north. They come up, go through the spring and in the fall. It's an amazing sight if you ever get to see them circle before they go to the chimney. I was mowing in North Asheville. Who knows what I ran over? It could, whatever. Sometimes I leave things in the, you know, whatever. I run into or over things with my lawnmower sometimes, but my own leaving. So anyway, so I was untangled whatever it is, put it in the dumpster. We kept the dumpster on the street at this little alley in North Asheville. And something hit my shoulder and went on the ground. And so it was getting dusk. So I went inside, I got a flashlight, and I was trying to get a flashlight on the bird. It was a bird. And Grove Arcade was going to do an installation based on the chimney swifts. They never did a call to artists, but I had thought I was going to do submit a proposal of something, some kind of mobile based on the chimney swifts. So I had researched them a ton. So when I saw that bird, and it was a chimney swift, I also knew that they couldn't walk and they couldn't get out, and they were always in the chimney by dusk. So I picked it up, and then I sat on the stoop. They have really long wings. They can fly over 500 miles a day because they never rest. So I didn't dare let go of it because I didn't know if the wings could do damage. So I just held it. And my ex was doing chair massage at her fair, so I held it, waiting for him to come home. So it was over 3 hours. I sat there with this over. And when he came home, I made one comment. I thought, the bird yawned. But anyway, it was just a beautiful, it was so amazing. He calmed down. He was just, you know, you could tell later that he had hit the telephone line because he lost his feathers here. He got sort of like stunned. So anyway, so we wrapped him in a blanket, put him in a cat area, put him on the back porch for the night. And then I went online trying to figure out what I needed to do to see, to let him go, or what I needed to do, because I knew they couldn't walk. So anyway, needless to say, I found out that I did see him yawn, because how many of you have seen a boa constrictor eat a rat? It's not the most pleasant thing, but everybody knows how it works. They unhinge and they can really open their mouths. Well, the chimney swifts, they only can eat, they fly all day. So they actually do the exact same thing. They can unhinge their beak all the way to their eye, so they can scoop, sort of like a pelican, or bugs while they fly. So I did see the bird yawn in a way that would just seem strange. So anyway, so the next day, I got a gardening glove on, so I had traction, so like and put them in there, and first we waited for the cheep, 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 cheep. They have such a little cheep, cheep sound. So then when I heard his friends outside, I took them outside and he flew off. So it took me a number of years, but to figure out a way to express what holding that little being had done to me. It will always be one of the most magical experiences. So they're just, I'm going to just take, you can't do this. So this is what it felt like to hold a chimney swift. That's why they're long and narrow. They're exactly this shape because it was like holding that chimney swift. It was around the same time my dad had Alzheimer's. So I was trying to figure out how you could capture magic, because it was a magical experience holding that bird. But also, with Alzheimer's, you look in someone's eyes, and there's light in there, whether they know you or not. Like my dad didn't know me, but he was still in there. And he knew something of me, but he might not know me. So the glass is how I resolved
of the experience of holding the chimney swift, and it also captures the magic of, because I use the vessel as a symbol for self. So all of us are a vessel, and so the symbol for self is a vessel. We all have a soul or a magic that is in everyone. So that's what the glass symbolizes, and I only use 3 kinds of glass. I use clear glass, everyday cutting jars, because there's all part of us. We all have a part that's ordinary. And then I was in grad school in New Bedford, Mass, and I loved the Casa Garcia Vino Verde. It was the Portuguese house wine. It's a pale blue bottle with a lace label. It's a Vino Verde, which means you do not save it. You savor it in the moment. You know, so that's another thing about life and about spirit, savoring in the moment. And the third one, the wonderful, so the Tilly stuff, the woman, Diane McGee, who I would fire with, she gave me a bottle. She said she liked that blue stuff. Here's another bottle for you. And so I was like, oh, I like that. And so I hadn't gotten super particular at that time, but I broke it up. And she gave me, I give a lot of people an excuse to drink. And so I don't drink, but I got breeders. And then one time she gave me one that had still the hang tag with the call tag around the bottle. It's Rika vodka from Iceland. Small batch, artisanal, and mostly thermal and very environmentally driven company. So those are the glass, I only use those glasses, those types of glass with the symbolic whatever stuff I attached to them. So, and then this was a piece I've been thinking about, because we're all in this river, or in my mind, these are all my ideas, so we're all in this river of life. And right now, we're all in this river of life. The core of us and the soul of us is we're all the same in the end. And so I wanted to do a piece that was about what I thought of humanity. And so I started these, trying to get my little handheld vessels on the wall during COVID. So I did a whole lot of posts where I had these, and then I have one post where there's one boat over here. And so I did a whole lot about visualizing, using that in terms of the isolation we had during COVID. But the part of this piece is really about that we're all together. And sort of it's the symbolism of the birds, the symbol of the boats, the symbolism of the differences and the togetherness. I work with a lot of different clay bodies, and so I just buy a couple of bags of clay, and so then I use them, and I use them until the end. And I'm still a textile artist. I know that stuff back in Florida, studied it. I haven't studied clay too much. I took a couple classes at Odyssey, but pretty much I told the teachers what I wanted to do, because I wanted to just do this. And so I just use a bag until it's the end. But if you're a textile artist, any textile artists in here? Do you save little pieces of fabric? Sure. Little bits of string? So in clay, you just smush things up. But I found out that I was really a textile artist. One time I had these slabs. I moved from Asheville to New Hampshire, went off to Asia for a couple months, got invited to the Penland instructor retreat, and I came back not knowing what I wanted to work in. So I brought my textile stuff, and I brought those slabs back down from New Hampshire to Asheville, took them up to Penland, and ended up working in the clay studio, and they made me sit on the porch and work because my slabs were so old. But it just made me aware that in their thought process, they would never do that. They would smush it up and make a new slab. But if you're a textile artist, you keep your fabric, you don't unravel it and then you weave it. And so my thought process and a lot of what I do is still based in textiles. And so I got these bags of clay, and I'm getting down to a smaller and smaller bit. And then I got a little bit, now I know, but this was years ago, that I could dry it out, smush it all up, mix all the clays together. But I just kept making until the end. So the teeny little vessels, the small, it's just the end of the bag of clay. I mean, that's how I ended up making these small vessels. I didn't know what I did with them. And then I started attaching them to some pieces after long time. That's where it was starting before that, but whatever. The idea of the inner child, the mother-daughter, the nurturing, all that is definitely a current phase based on her and my relationship with her. Just like the space between the skeletal pieces are a lot. They were started many years ago. I can work on things for series for a long time. I think it was Winslow, when Winslow's passing, when I was really thinking about the gravity shifting, and I was moving to
so when something is sort of solid, it makes a shadow, but it's a solid shadow. But when it's sort of a skeletal, and a lot of folks go through their making, there's sort of like a skeleton just for this. But there's also a time when we go back to just being sort of that skeletal, and all the other stuff goes away, and it's the shadows or the essence that is the memories. And so this is a piece that's a lot about that, where it's it's called the space between, because it's the shadows. I'm making those vessels for the shadows. I mean, I'm making the vessels to be the vessels. I love making the vessels, but I thought that's a lot of sort of nitpicky textile techniques. So I love working on them, but the materials I'm choosing that is for the shadows. Oh, and then we have a new body of work that I started last year, and this is the second sort of chapter in that, and that was when Mom was, there's some things, like I can say a lot in these, they create relationships, possibilities, which vessel you take, which canoe, which paddle you use. There's all kinds of different references, you know, this bird, this is called begin, so this vessel is it emerging, is it beginning its internal journey? All these sorts of things, but I can say something different in 2D. These vessels relate in a very different way than the other ones. So, and it sort of harks back to a lot of the textile sort of surfaces that I use on my slabs. But this was definitely something I've been thinking about for years. I used to go up on top of the crack, just shy of Craggy Gardens, I forget the overlook, and listen to On Being with Krista Tippett as the sun rose. That was my thing I did for many, many months, and now I miss that. But I would do these little sketches using security envelope patterns. You ever looked at inside the security envelopes? There's all these amazing patterns, all different gradations of gray and different patterns. So I have a collection of security envelope patterns. And so the first in this series were these little sketches I did based on sort of that sea of mountains up there, something that she would say in the talk. Krista Tippett is an amazing speaker on all her she interviewed amazing people that would make you think about life. Different things. And so I started these little paper sketches with the security envelopes, and that's what led to these. But it allowed me to say different things than I can say in these. These say one thing, those say another. So I think I'll take questions now. I've said a lot. There's a lot more. If you know me, I can go on and on. Meaning, I don't do too many things without thoughtful consideration. Sometimes it's more I shouldn't say that. Retract that. It's not thoughtful consideration. I trust my intuitive instinct that is very thoughtful. I only can understand and express it and give words to it later. So it's more about it's not thoughtful, it's intuitive, whatever. I trust my intuitive process, I guess. So, are there any questions? Okay, Bill.
So when you say you made this group for the shadows, are you speaking about the shadows that I'm seeing right now because of how it's displayed?
Then what else would you think it was if it wasn't that?
Or are you thinking about more energetic shadows?
Both. Because I'm creating the shadows to evoke the spiritual shadows. Because if you ever, I love shadows, so if I can't ever touch a shadow. Because the minute I put my hand there, it touches me. But I cannot touch the shadow. So shadows have fascinated me for a long time. You know, I put my hand down and now the shadow is on top of me. But it's not underneath, I can't touch the shadow. So the shadow is magic, just like light. It's a form of light. So those are trying to, I'm using the shadows to try to capture something. Because shadows they change. You can't control them. They shift. So they give, that's one reason why I moved from 2D to 3D. So I still love I'll still do G. But in my, I couldn't express the shadows, or the shadows that I didn't make but were created by light in the 2D. I could imply, I could paint them in, but that's not the same as a shadow that is the piece. Like this shadow isn't my, it belongs to the piece. So it extends the piece. So
So the piece has something that's beyond what I made in the shadow. It's got a more, it's got whatever, but it's got something that is way beyond me in the shadow. So, yeah, those pieces were made for the shadow, but also for the symbolic implication of the shadow. Does that answer your question?
Sure did.
Okay. Okay, right.
When I first came into the room, when I was looking around, it seemed like I've always thought of all the other work as emphatically static, and that these are like in motion. Is that intentional? Either of those? That these are like boom, like not boom, you know, like they might. I can go places with dreams or whatnot, but the actual objects seem like they're not going to move, very rigid. And these are like, I look at them and I know they're not moving, but they seem like they're moving.
So I would say that these are all about the possibility of you taking this vessel somewhere, you know, your interaction, the story you create with these. But it is something that they're not moving at this point. You would have to put them in, you would have to make the story and put them in action. There's a few that I have that are suspended, where there's like some sense of motion, where it can actually move. Like this can, you know this isn't moving, but it can move up. You know, these are how, they evoke all kinds of things, but for me, there's some of this is, there's movement, and you can interpret any way, but some of it is about crossing over. So yeah. So it's about that journey of wherever you go, but there's also that sense of, you know, I don't know, to me, of crossing over. Or connection. My mom was waiting to see her dad. She thought she was 5. Faye was the one that was so wanting to cross over for. There's vessels in this place and there's vessels somewhere else. And so I can allude to, you can read whatever. Whenever I say anything about what this work is about, whoever comes to the work, hopefully they have their own relationship. But for me, that sort of quietness and that, when I worked on these last year, I finished them up right after Mom passed. And I had the spaces where they're going sort of more shuttered. She needed more space to cross. I mean, sometimes spirits hang around for a while before they find where they need to go. And so I had to keep opening them up when I was working on them. And so when I'm working on these, it's about a journey, about possibilities, but it's also about, and I've worked with this theory way back before. I had one where I had a physical vessel on the wall on a shelf. I had a textile that had a vessel, and it had all these words on it in black. And then you had words in white, and so they were said in the spirit world, but you would hear them, but you could only read the black ones. And so it was about the reality of this physical boat. This person that had crossed over was talking to this other person that crossed over. And so this theme, or this idea, thread, has been with me for a long time. When I was on a train in Japan, I was embroidering in a journal, and I did all these black lines, and I did white lines with my ubiquitous button and carpet thread that you don't leave home without it. It'll mend anything, seriously. And that's when I first started thinking about that the black lines were, you know, when you're in a, I mean, I speak Japanese, but when you're in a place where, I guess a lot of my ideas about language, when I was traveling around there, that I could understand some, but there were some dialects I couldn't understand. So that idea that you could have something that is said but not understood. And that's where this idea where the black lines were the understood lines in this realm, and the white lines were understood in another realm. So they knew what they were talking about, but I didn't know what they were talking about. And so that idea of, and then there's a whole, you know, you can go all kinds of New Agey, go down all kinds of paths with spirits and auras and all kinds of energies, but there's some of that in what I'm thinking about when I'm making those. So did that answer your question? Okay, that was probably a little roundabout and way more than you did.
I was just curious with connecting the symbols about in the California, New York, there's a big elevation connection, Rockefeller connection. There is a dugout canoe that's maybe almost as long as this room that is dug out in the bottom as well. When someone dies, they set it out in the water so the spirit can travel back into the water.
There is, when I started using boats just for me, for my own personal history. I did not realize or know so many cultures have vessels attributed to the end of life ceremonies in so many different cultures. And so boats have a specific use, they're functional, they're spiritual, they're all kinds of things in this lifetime, but there also is a huge, huge tradition. They set, I think normally they set them on fire. There's so many, there's the river Styx, there's so many places in different cultures, in different mythologies, in different, what would you call it, ethno parts of that cultures, that is where vessels are associated with the cross, the end of life and crossing over. Yep, I also have been working on a vessel formed as an urn, and so far, I'm still working on them, but Mom is in one, and we used one at her memorial, and it was very fitting, and, so there is that is also a whole other tangent, but in my thought process of these materials and what I'm working with. Any other questions? I answered all of them. That's great. That means I did a good job as a talk, because I gave you either too much information and you don't know what to do with it, or I gave you enough to